Welcome to the video, Why Pavilion for SQL Server, a chat with a database expert, part of the Pavilion video series. I am Costa Hasapopoulos, the Chief Field Technology Officer for Pavilion Data. I'll be joined with David Klee, the founder of Heraflux Technologies and a deep SQL Server expert. In this three-part video series, this is part one of three, we're going to have a fireside chat of the value of high-performance storage and what impact that can have in a SQL Server environment. Before we actually get into the actual interview with David, let's give a brief overview of the Pavilion and a Pavilion scalable architecture. Some of the comments that David and I will talk about relate to this architecture. What you're seeing on the screen is our Pavilion storage hyperparallel storage array. The picture on the left is a rear view, picture on the right is a top view. We are a multi-controller architecture. We can have up to 20 independent storage controllers. We can have up to 72 NVMe drives that can connect to any one of our storage controllers. We deliver almost 2 petabytes of usable capacity. We have up to 40 100 gig Ethernet or InfiniBand ports, all connected together with a 6.1 terabit internal PCIe switch. All of this packed into 4 rack units. The result is delivering over 120 gigabytes a second read, 90 gigabytes a second write. We can deliver 20 million read IOPS and 5 million write IOPS, all at an impressive latency in the sub 100 microsecond range. Write latency in the 25 microsecond range, delivering unrivaled performance density. Before we actually get into the interview and David will actually introduce himself, I want to give a brief slide on David Klee, who's the founder of Heraflux Technology and Sequilibrium Education. You can see his contact information below. David is a performance tuner, enterprise database architecture, and infrastructure architect, and he would say a self-proclaimed geek. We've worked with David quite a bit. David is a great DBA, a great architect, and really has a lot of insights on SQL Server and how to performance tune and how to get the most out of SQL Server in general. With that, let's get into the video and the interview. Yeah, so you heard a little bit about me in the introduction of this video. I want to turn it over to David from Heraflux Technologies. And David, can you brag about yourself a little bit and tell us kind of your background and your expertise in the database space and how it applies to our topics today?
Absolutely. My name is David Klee. I'm the founder of Heraflux Technologies and Sequilibrium Education. I'm lucky enough to be a Microsoft Data Platform MVP and a VMware vExpert. So I spend my days working on some of the largest database environments in the world. If it gives you a little depth on my background on this, I virtualized my first copy of SQL Server in November of '99. I had everything in production virtualized in 2004. And it was 2006 when somebody told me you couldn't virtualize anything important, like a big database server. I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. I actually wrote VMware Corporate's partner level training and accreditation for how to virtualize enterprise SQL servers. And since then, I've been working with them on their best practices guide and a lot of R&D with really big database servers. And I've been consulting around how to performance tune and make these things more highly available since 2011, actually. So 10 full years now. And I've worked on literally some of the largest database environments in the world, both physical and virtual. I have a blast with this stuff. You'll find I'm an absolute nerd with this. I heat my house with my test lab. You know, I live this stuff.
Great. When you first introduced myself, or we got introduced to each other, you also made a comment educating me on, running SQL Server in Linux, and as well as that's a supportive platform today. But it wasn't, I believe, a few years back when you did that.
Yep.
You will comment on that?
Yeah, so SQL Server on Linux has been around since 2017. If it gives you any background, there's a photo of me floating around the internet with a really large poofball afro. I'm wearing a VA Linux t-shirt, and this was from high school. I have been a Linux fan for a long time, even before I knew Windows. I actually was compiling Slackware Linux kernels when I was in the 5th grade, if that tells you anything. So I go way back with Linux.
Yeah. So anyways, as we get started in the thing, David will self-proclaim himself as a geek and he knows his stuff. So with that, let's get into the rest of these conversations. So thanks, David.
Okay.
Looking forward to our. So David, as a storage provider, we brag about our IOPS and our throughput and all that kind of stuff. And yes, we have really super low latency, but you've been beating me over the head that latency is one of the key things for SQL Server, and to be honest, all sorts of other databases. Can you give us a little color on why that's important to SQL Server and what's intriguing about Pavilion?
Absolutely. When it comes to databases, essentially the business operation is not just reads, but it's also changing data. The act of being able to commit that change to disk, it's got to be hardened. So that is literally the speed at which the business is doing business. So I have to get that hardened to disk as fast as humanly possible in order for that command to continue on and do the rest of what it's supposed to do. The beauty of the Pavilion arrays is that my latency to disk is literally the lowest in the industry. It's absolutely incredible. And from a core business operation standpoint, if I can make that change faster, you cut down the amount of time for the transaction, which means concurrency gets better. The speed of that operation gets better. Your user experience is better. Your users are more productive. That big burst operation that's loading data at the end of the day runs a whole lot faster. So you have that data to process quicker. And just everything related to data change just speeds up, especially the writes, but as well as reads. If you're reading data from disk all the time, if I can spend less time waiting on storage to go retrieve it, I spend more time operating on that and actually being able to do real-time processing, where before maybe I could only do near real-time. And if we're talking financial systems, healthcare, lives depend on this stuff being there really as fast as you can possibly get it.
We've also talked about, we showed the latency as it relates to a bare metal server, but I think we've delivered some pretty impressive latency with VMware. Talk about the value of VMware and what is the effect of that could have in your overall ecosystem.
Absolutely. Yeah. Essentially, VMware specifically, if I have the ability to decouple a workload from the dependencies of a physical server, I can now run it on any of my servers, which is wonderful because now it's highly available by default inside these VMware platforms. So if a host fails, it restarts somewhere else. It means DR is a whole lot easier to manage. It means I can dynamically add resources. All these, all the illities that come along with this stuff, it's fantastic. And the fact that Pavilion performs so well under VMware means you're looking at bare metal speeds. And when VMware is tuned correctly, there's really no functional overhead from the hypervisor itself. So you've got all the benefits of virtualization with no drawbacks. So why wouldn't you?
It's interesting that testing, we actually saw in the write performance, the VMware was better than the bare metal on Windows. Very interesting. And kind of a surprising thing, but yeah. Cool to hear.
Yeah, if as long as the VMware layer is tuned properly for your workload, literally you proved it better than bare metal performance. That's awesome.
David, you've also talked about ways to kind of lay out the database, and Pavilion has a multi-controller architecture, up to 20 controllers and multiple volumes, and as you add things to a controller, things scale linearly. What does that do, and how does that manifest itself to value to SQL Server, as an example?
The value of the multiple controller architecture is historically underutilized. Now, DBAs by practice always want to go spread out data, log, tempdb, backups, those sort of things. It's just something they've done for a long time. It's Microsoft best practices to do it, and people just got used to it, and it's the right thing to do. The problem is, as you spread this stuff out, most environments, it's literally one SAN, one active controller, one set of disks. You end up with this daisy chain effect as you work up the infrastructure stack, where the number of inbound queues on that controller are finite. The number of queues inside a hypervisor are finite by LUN. The amount of controller queues at the operating system level are also finite. So if we can leverage multiple controllers with colliding commands, essentially, so either data and log and tempdb, spread them out. if we've got data that's commonly being joined, so patient data to medical history data, or address to orders, this kind of stuff, you can spread this stuff out. So now you've got the full power of the controller and the storage queues leading all the way through all the layers of the stack, all the way into the database architecture itself. If you get better concurrency all the way at the top, because everything underneath is more highly concurrent, you get better performance, you get lower latency, and you end up with a better experience. So having the ability to scale this thing out properly, not just at one of the layers, but now at all the layers, it's incredibly powerful. When you start hitting multi-terabyte databases, it matters. It really matters.
Yes, that's a testament to the non-dual controller architecture Pavilion, our many controller architecture. Good feedback. That completes part one of our three-part series, Why Pavilion for SQL Server, a chat with a database expert. Go check out parts 2 and 3, where David will provide many more insights on how to optimize SQL Server to take advantage of high performance, low latency storage like Pavilion. If you want to learn more about Pavilion, check out our other videos at www.pavilion.io, or reach out to us at email at info@pavilion.io, or you can always call us on the phone. We'd love to talk to you about how we can help you solve some of your challenging storage problems and help you deliver great outcomes to your businesses. Thank you.